John, welcome to the Way Champions podcast, my friend. It's so great to see your face again after our incredible couple days together in France a few months back.
Well, thank you, Jon, so much for having me. And the same was great seeing you there. And I think we had some great conversations, both between you and me, and also with all the other fantastic people that were in Nice.
That was a wonderful event, and I think often of, it's not just the presentations, but it's the 3 hour dinners and everything else that just really made it, and just when you really just get to the heart of things and get to know people and you and I and Jean Cote were, on hikes and going down to
Yeah.
the beach and jumping in the water and whatever. It was a wonderful time. And so I've been so excited to have you on the podcast and talk about some of the stuff that you were talking about there. So you ready to dive in?
Yeah, I'm more than ready. I was really looking forward to this conversation, and I guess like to the point of everything going on between presentations, like our breakfasts that kind of lasted for 2 or 3 hours, just talking about sports and youth development and everything. It was so great.
Yeah, awesome. Well, maybe just tell our listeners a little bit about your background, first, as an athlete and then, coach, developer, and what you do with Sweden ice hockey.
Yeah, well, so my name then is John Lin, and I work as Director of Education and Research at the Swedish Ice Hockey Association. And I've been with the association for now soon to be the last 9 years. But I have as a background as a player, played on a national team level as a junior, never made it at a senior level, and also quitted quite early due to concussions. And pretty straight after my playing career, I started coaching. So I actually started coaching the team that I played in. So went to coaching seniors, being a pretty young guy, 24 years old, coaching adults, had former NHL players sometimes on the team, had this kind of imposter syndrome. What the hell I'm supposed to learn these guys, but I think it went quite well. So coached adults, then went to coaching juniors up in Skellefteå for a couple of years. Had some great years there with a lot of unbelievable talented players who made it all the way to the NHL. And then back to coaching seniors, overseeing junior and youth programs, and after that ended up at the federation. So been there for 9 years, doing both like player development within national team pathways, the camps and stuff that we have, and now for the last at least 6-7 years doing coach education, coach development, and last like 4 years more and more of the research projects that I oversee that we do together with the federation and the universities in Sweden. So I think that's the quick background there.
No, it's great. Did you when you were playing, did you ever think about becoming a coach? Was that something? Was there coaching in your family? Did you have great coach mentors, or was that something that when you couldn't play, you just wanted to stay around the game and stay in it, and that's where coaching was the pathway?
Well, I guess when you're playing, you're so consumed by playing. So I actually didn't have any thoughts of going into coaching at that point, but like probably somewhere deep in my mind, I had that idea though. And like for the identity part, when you had to quit playing so quickly, like due to concussions, like from the other day, one day to another, I kind of felt pretty early on that, well, I want to at least be part of the game, help other people develop, being captain of the team, knew that at least I had some kind of influence in other persons and people. So I think the transition were quite smoothly, and also kind of the idea to give back to hockey, because as you said, I had a lot of unbelievable good coaches. And also I didn't have my dad though, but he was coaching my brother, and seeing the passion he had about human beings and helping others growing up, I felt like, well, this is something I also want to do. So I think it kind of organically developed for me the interest of being a coach, just from identity pieces, wanting to help out, stay in the game. So I think it was a lot of factors that made me a coach in the beginning.
Mm, mm. I want to go back because I didn't know that actually that piece about you, being 24 and being a senior coach and coaching, former NHL players and stuff and that imposter syndrome. But you said you thought it went pretty well. Why do you think it went well? And I'm not talking about wins and losses, but how were you able to serve players maybe on the tail end of their career coming out of the NHL and serve up and coming players as someone who was so young because I don't think 24-year-old John O'Sullivan would have done that very well.
No, but I guess like for me, I kind of pretty early on realized I don't need to have all the answers. I don't need to be the expert on everything. Like the players are driving the development in so many ways. I just need to pick up what they are doing and talking about and kind of facilitate and ask the right questions, put them in the right directions, and just have them reflect. And then I can pick that up and systemize that in the coaching process. So I guess like when it turned for me, when was I was coaching Andrew Raycroft, the former NHL goalie, won the Calder Trophy once in his career also, and I said like, "Hey, Racer, what am I supposed to say to you?" And he was like, "Well, John, I've been the player for my whole life. You coach 1,000 games so far. You know coaching way better than me. I'm just a player. Like, I have respect for the things that you do. I could never do that because I'm a player." So him stepping up and saying that to me kind of changed my perspectives. Like, and to his point, well, I was the coach, he was the player. He
Hmm.
knew some stuff about the game better than me, but I could facilitate like his learning still just by asking the right questions. So I think that was kind of when it shifted for me, and I felt more comfortable and confident in being a coach also.
Do you think because you were a player on, you were on the international pathway or representing your country and then you got hurt, it gave you a little more credibility maybe than someone who just wasn't good enough? Does that question make sense? I mean, I think about this a
Yeah,
lot, right? Where players are like, look, you've never been in that locker room. You don't understand versus someone like, yeah, you were pretty good and you got hurt.
yeah, I guess both. My career has kind of stalled when I had the last injury, so I had to quit. I kind of figured out I will never make it to the highest level as a senior, but still,
Hmm.
like since I've been in the locker room, I kind of had at least the nuances of the game. I had the understanding of what it took to be a great player. So I guess like at least in the beginning, I had some benefits of have been playing at a higher level,
Hmm.
and I also think like in the beginning of being a coach, it was pretty neat for me to be able to relate how it felt to be a player. I could kind of on point saying, well, this was a pretty tricky drill or too hard or whatever, because
Hmm.
I kind of felt it still in my bones.
Hmm.
But as I evolved as a coach, I lost that perspective more because it was a long time since I played. But then I gained other kind of knowledge. So I think it kind of evened out. But uh, I think it was good for me to start with a player background, but I don't by any means think it's necessary that you have the former player background, that at least played at a higher level. I think you can be a great coach without that. It might
Yeah.
take a bit longer sometimes due to the
Yeah.
fact that you just mentioned.
Because regardless of your playing career, you can lose the respect of everyone in that locker room immediately if you're not in it for them, if you don't form the relationships and do all that. So it doesn't matter what you've done on the ice. So at the same time, if you haven't done it off the ice, but people feel like, okay, he's in it for me, she's in it for me, he's making me better. I'm a
Yeah.
better player. My career is progressing because of this coach, then I don't really care what they've done.
No, and I guess sometimes we have this perception that a former player is also always a good coach, but coaching is something totally different.
Totally
It's
different.
a way about the things that you just mentioned, like the ability to build relationship, to build trust, to build so people feel that you're helping them, that it's a collaboration. You're there together to achieve something. You are striving to common goals, not goals that a coach set up. So, like, if you are good at those parts, you probably be a really good coach too. It's not so much about the X's and O's. It
Yeah.
might be the ticket in somehow to coaching, for example, at least you know something about the game. But in the long run, it's like all about communication, relationships, inter and interpersonal skills. How you reflect on your own behaviors. Who do you affect other people? How can you influence them towards the goals you set together?
Yeah.
Coaching is way more about those components, in my view.
Yeah. We had a woman on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, Betsy Butterick, and she does communication stuff. And she was working with a Las Vegas Raiders, so NFL. And she's in the building, and the coach showing her around calls over one of the players, very well known player, of course, big, huge guy. And he said, "Hey, she's about to talk to the coaches about, being more effective communicators for all of you. What should she tell them?" And he goes, "Talk to me. Don't yell at me. Talk
Yeah,
to me. I'm a man, right? Make me better, but
yeah,
treat me with respect. Don't scream at me." And I thought that was like, this is it. Like even this giant human being just says, "Talk to me and show
yeah.
me respect," right?
It's those small things, like on a human level, that actually make changes in people and build this trust. I think that's a great example. And also, I listen to the podcast, so
Yeah, okay, good.
yeah,
Thanks, John.
yeah,
Thanks for doing
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah. All right. So then knowing that, right, as the director of both research and then coach development, how do you take these things? Because I think when most people go into coach development, they're thinking about drills and X's and O's and the sports science side of things. And how do you teach them that that's the foundation, but that's not everything?
well, I guess nowadays we can support pretty much on science also here, to show that the interpersonal skills and knowledges are at times more important to be effective as a coach, like all the things that
Jean
Jean Cote
Coté, yeah,
and Jennifer Turner has done in
yeah,
coaching and the effectiveness of coaching. So if you just take the definition, like the consistent application of inter, and professional knowledge is coaching effectiveness.
yeah,
So there's a reason that you have all those three components there.
yeah.
So I think, like, first off, we can show with science in a way that coaches can understand that those kind of competencies are equally important. So we can't only have the accesses in a coach development program.
Hmm.
Uh, and also, I think, like, if we highlight those components within the programs and make them not stand out, but being a part of, for example, a drill, like, how do you communicate within this drill? How do you
Yeah.
communicate within a game situation? Or how do you build trust? Or how do you build relationship within, so they aren't separate things?
Hmm.
I think that's kind of key. And for us, like, we kind of reversed engineer our coach education program, because what you typically do is what you mentioned here. You started, what should we put in there, like in terms of hockey specific, in drills, in X's and O's, but we started more in starting with the human being. What are the outcomes that we want to see on the players? Well, we want to have for sure performance, but mostly we want to have motivation for them to feel competent. We want them to have fun and enjoyment and health and well-being as human beings. And if this is the outcomes we want to achieve within the players, how then should our coach education program look like, based on the knowledge types that the coaches need to have?
Hmm.
And then for sure, they need to tick it in with sport specific, but mostly it's communication, relationship building, self reflection, and also health and well being among the coaches. Because if you can't take care of yourself, you can't help others.
Yeah.
So I think that's how we try to communicate it to the coaches and also to the clubs, so they have the understanding on why we are doing what we are doing.
Yeah. And I think that helps with the imposter syndrome sometimes as well, because we're not just talking about imposter syndrome coaching a pro team or a senior team. It's that coach, the grassroots coach, just starting going, "I don't know enough about hockey." And you're like, "Wait a second. Look at all these interpersonal skills. Look at
Yeah.
all this stuff. If you do this well, you're a lot of the way there." And oh, okay, I get it. Right. And so I think it's brilliant to start that way. I don't know that too many people do that.
Well, I think there's a change going on in sports in general, and also like in ice hockey, where this is more and more important. Like there's a lot of countries that are making changes, and like for example, you see hockey and Finland and Germany, they are way ahead in this kind of thought process too. So I think it's coming more and more, and people are acknowledged that this is really important for youth development and also for development athletes. So like I think we want to achieve both. So.
Yeah, yeah. Um, what I think is one of the challenges, and I love, so first of all, I love what Jean Coté talked about when we were together and his research in transformational coaching and just this idea of coaching effectiveness, right? Like you're in front of a room of coaches, raise your hand if you would like to be less effective. No one's going to raise their hand,
No.
right? So, okay, so we all want to be more effective. So these are the things that make us more effective, which is this connection with our athletes, regardless of that. And then this I think it's often overlooked by coaches, taking care of yourself, right?
Yeah.
Making sure that you're actually putting yourself first, not last. Your health, your sleep, your stress, your well-being. Because you can't, the parable of the starving baker. If you're out there feeding everyone else and you don't feed yourself, you starve. And so that's really important to get across as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and also like for sure, it's kind of sometimes tough to be coaching at the highest level, like with the demands from fans, from sponsors, from players, from everything. But it can also be even more stressful to coach kids because you have a full-time job, you are driving your car, you're trying to figure out what you do in practice today. How can I challenge all the kids within the group? How can I give them a positive experience? It can be exhausting. So I think it can be really, really stressful to be a youth coach, also, sometimes even more than coaching adults in a pro level. So, and just to be able to help others if you aren't feeling well yourself, it's kind of hard to put in the effort and also to acknowledge the feelings and the perspective on other people when you're consumed by your own thoughts and feelings. So I think
Yeah.
that's a really important perspective to take.
Yeah, yeah. And I think coming to terms as well with if you were an athlete, the end of your career, right? Especially someone who gets injured or whatever and has
Yeah,
to stop. And it's very easy to carry over any unfulfilled ambitions or anger about that into your coaching and just not be a very effective coach for people until you deal with that, until you go inside and come to terms with, I'm not a player anymore. I'm a coach
yeah,
now.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I also think like sometimes the layers of, like if you work with coach development or coach education, or if you work as a coach to the player, all those layers are also important to acknowledge. Like it's not the same to be a coach as to be a player. It's not the same to be a coach developer as be a coach. So you
Yeah.
need to always look at the layers in here, and it's the same knowledges, but it's applied differently. So I
Hmm.
think that's also important to acknowledge.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue into your role as a coach developer. Of all the people I've ever met in all my travels doing this, I don't know that I've met anyone who is so, practically based knowledge wise and then research knowledge wise as you are. Like, yeah, you blew me away with all your knowledge of the research and the papers. It was super impressive. And I love how you pull that together. Now, I think a lot of times the research is just sometimes catching up with what effective coaches are already doing, and now maybe we're putting a label to it or a name to it. Um, what got you interested in the science and the research side of it and pulling it into the practical business of developing coaches?
Well, I think it's several things that actually made us be more evidence based, so to say. And I like to use the term evidence informed because we can't be evidence based all the time.
Hmm.
And for us, being evidence based is to listen to the players, their perspective. It's a sometimes overseen piece of the puzzle. Use the experts' opinions, like the coaches who have been coaching, and figure it out. but then confirm it with scientific evidence. And if we can use all those three components when we make decisions, then we have a solid foundation for making great decisions, which makes the program better,
Hmm.
and also we will hopefully save money. But the research part, I think, is really important because we are in a business with human beings,
Hmm.
and we have an ethical responsibility to take the best evidence standpoint when we make the decisions, because otherwise people might get harmed. So I think it's an ethical and our responsibility to bring in as much research as we can to follow at least the flow of the research and make it practical because it's human beings. So I think that's the first and foremost reason why we are doing it, and why I also started to look so much into research,
Yeah.
because we won't do no harm.
Yeah. And I think it's so great you said that. And it just what pops into my head is something like checking in ice hockey for very young players. And I remember when USA Hockey removed it for 12 and unders and the uproar of, oh my God, we're going to fall behind, right? Or heading in soccer or
Yeah,
tackling in American football, right? Where the evidence says that this human body can't sustain that type of impact and it has a negative long-term effect. So if we back off, right, and you have to fight against the old school, oh, well,
yeah,
that's not how we played in our day. It was fine. I remember I forget. It was a very famous Canadian hockey player who wrote a book years ago, and he was talking about concussions in hockey. And he was saying, all the people making the hockey rules and in like FIFA soccer, all the people who make the rules, they played ages and ages ago. And he said, you know what? All of you making these rules in hockey about checking or wearing helmets or whatever, you played 40 years ago. The shifts were 2.5 minutes long. The speed that people were going, the size of players, it was a completely different game. It wasn't someone at full speed all the time crashing into you. So that's just a perfect example of using the evidence to say we need to make a change in the game, right?
yeah. And I think we can't only, because if you only have the expert opinions, that's where we will end up.
Yeah.
But should still respect the opinions of people that've been around, but we can't only reproduce things that we
Have
did
always
10,
done.
15 had all done,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
then we will never develop. We
yeah,
will reproducing bad behaviors.
yeah.
So I think it's really important for us to actually have the combination of everything. And I think the part that we normally misses out is the player perspective, because they are leading the development of the game, and
Mhm.
also they kind of systemize the things that they figure out works. So then we can also then uh, see in research why does it work, because a lot of times when we only have expert opinions and player opinions, we can say this works, but it's a correlation. We don't know cause and effect, what is actually the reason for it to work, and that we can figure out with research. So I think like having the holistic view and taking all the pieces of the puzzle together when when you make the decisions, that's what drives development in hockey.
Mhm.
uh, but also we need to be aware that sometimes what's the best available evidence might not be practical for reasons, because it's socioeconomic backgrounds, or it is resources, or not enough rings or whatever. So we also need to be practical, what actually works in practice, and use a language of people can understand. I think that's also important. And the last thing there, I think, from our perspective too, sometimes we take calculated risks that's not supported in research, but we want to drive innovation too. So
Mhm.
if it ain't harmful, it
Yeah,
might not cost as much, then we can try stuff that aren't so far been proven right in research,
yeah,
because we also want to be better than USA Hockey and Hockey Canada and Finland. So
yeah.
sometimes we allow ourselves to be a bit not so scientifically. So I think there's a balance there: practical, innovation, evidence based.
Yeah. Can you give examples of something moving away from like injury prevention where new or emerging evidence or research informs and changes how you might run a practice. I mean, things I'm thinking of are like the emerging research on scanning,
Yeah.
um, and taking in information, and certainly, transfer and games-based learning and things like that. Any like examples for our listeners to go, oh yeah, okay, I get that now.
Well, there's a growing body of research regarding scanning and cognition, like how you gather information on the ice or on the pitch in soccer, and then how you use that information to make great decisions. Because, like in the end of the day, sports is about time and space, and you want to make decisions that give you more time and space. So
Hmm.
there's quite of articles now in soccer, and we've done one paper in hockey on scanning.
Hmm.
And we know that scanning can be seen as a proxy for decision making. So we done a paper in the highest men and female league in Sweden, where we looked into scanning, and we can see that there's a correlation between if you scan more and gather more information, the following sequence will be more likely successful if you scan more.
Hmm.
And we can also see patterns that we didn't publish in the paper, that the better players are better at scanning, not necessarily more, but they scan a bit longer and collect more information.
Mm.
So from that knowledge, then, if we want our players to make better decisions, then we need to put them in positions when they play games as kids, as well as in practices, so they can make those decisions, not have scripted drills,
Hmm.
open drills. And like there's also a growing body of research then in skill acquisition, like for example constant ladder approach and ecological dynamics, that we try to implement as much as possible in practice, but without using the kind of excluding terminology. I think they have taken it too far with the language, that they exclude coaches,
Yeah,
because
I
coaches
agree with
are
that.
not so easy to understand. And sometimes I think you and me at least are to some point up to speed with the research, but it's hard to follow. So we try to use a language, but take the principles from that. So the more we can use game-based drills for both decision making and skill acquisition, the better. Can we
Hmm.
use constraints to manipulate the task or the environment or the individuals? Then it's a great way to acquire skills. But with that said, since hockey is on a small blade with a stick in your hand, you still at times need to practice isolated technique. But
Hmm.
that's the job and the craft of being a coach, knowing when should I isolate and when should I do this in context. I
Right.
think we need both, but we try to promote more decision making, constant led based practices, but as I said, without using the language.
Hmm.
So that's one part, like in training sessions. And the other part for us, in if we want to have this creative problem solver, then we also should have appropriate setting for the kids when they play games. So
Hmm.
we, a couple of years ago back, changed the game formats. So we are now playing small-sided games from U8 up to U12. So the first years we are playing on 1/6 of the surface for the youngest players, and then between uh, 9 and 11 we are playing on 1/4, and then under 12 1/3 of the
Hmm.
surface, 3 against 3 all the
Hmm.
time. So the coaches can't coach the game. We want the
Hmm.
players to interact and solve the problems, get more repetitions, closer proximity to each other. And we think this is beneficial for play development, more repetitions, decision making. And also, we hope that it's a prevention for future concussions, because they are closer together. They need to keep their head up. So,
Hmm.
this is two examples, both practice session and in games.
Yeah. And I love that. And I mean, some of your research that you've done in that 3v3 format,
Yeah.
it's showed compared to a full ice format, like a significant percentages more passes completed, goals scored, shots on goal, duels. right? Like, can you talk about
Yeah.
some of that? Because, and this has been repeated in every sport that's gone to a small-sided format. If you want more decisions, more problem solving, more success, put them in a smaller area with less players.
Yeah, what we did were that we used uh, under 8, under 10, under 12, under 14 players. We played them 3 against 3, 4 against 4, 5 against 5. One sixth of the ice, one fourth, one third, and full ice. All age categories, all setups. And then we collected data with Catapult for GPS tracking, like distances and strides and player load and everything. We had Instat collecting all the kind of the player variables, how many passes, how many shots and goals, close combat, everything that we could. And then we also observed all the games afterwards in video sessions. So we filmed everything. So then we had objective data from the key components of the game. We had GPS data, and we also had the subjective parts where we watched the game. So then we combined all this together, and we can see then, for example, that the number of actions in each category increased between 2 times to 6 times for each, like passing, shooting, or close combat, or whatever. But there's also a limit where more actions isn't necessarily good because the quality at times went down. So then we made a decisions that we will not have the oldest player playing small area games because it was too messy. The quality
Mm-hmm.
went down. So we kind of used everything that we had to make those decisions. Make those decisions. So I think it's so far a pretty good success. The coaches like it, the players likes it. The only part where it might be some discussion still is around U12 playing one third of the ice,
Mm-hmm.
because they are kind of sometimes thinking that they should be able to stretch the skating more.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see their point, but still they can practice skating in the practice session instead of the games then, so they can figure it out.
And is there opportunities to have different game models too, right? Like, we don't have to say, oh, you're 12, you 12, you can only play 3v3. Like, we can play a bigger game. We can stretch it a tiny bit. We can do these. I mean, it's like it doesn't always have to be that. I mean, I know in the United States we're struggling. USA Hockey had a lot of great success with this small-sided model. And now you have different cities or areas of the country switching back, right?
Yeah.
Because, and it's not driven by evidence or necessarily coaches, it's driven by parents saying, I want to see my kid who grew first on the big sheet of ice skating around all the little kids because it makes me feel good,
Yeah.
right? And then when that kid's not good enough at 16, it's like, oh, yeah, well, I hope you enjoyed that, under nine full-sided hockey that you played.
Yeah, I think that's of course we have people wanting to play real hockey, so to speak, for kids because the parents think real hockey is better because they have sometimes then kids that are early developed. So we try to keep the rules quite strict, so they actually can't play in the leagues otherwise than with the formats that we have decided. And what we did to actually have this strong background when we changed, we did reference groups without basically all districts, and then we put it up on our Congress. So the districts voted for the change, and
Hmm.
all district voted for.
Hmm.
And on this district's annual meetings, the clubs are voting. So it's actually the clubs who have voted for this change. So
Hmm.
we left it. We showed them this is the evidence. This is what we suggest, but you decide. So having that said, the clubs themselves voted for a change. So
Hmm.
it's hard for them to say now that this wasn't what we wanted
Hmm.
because they voted for it. So I think that makes the acceptance of the change much stronger also. So
Hmm.
we keep the rules pretty tight. The end of the year U12 they can play a couple of tournaments in full ice, but otherwise we in the leagues we keep it pretty tight.
Yeah. Yeah. You put up some really other fascinating stuff there too, and I think it's important to note right? Sweden, population wise, compared to a country like the US, where I think we have, nearly 2 million ice hockey players, and what you have 78,000 or something like that. Was that the number? I'm going to get it wrong, but just like this whole idea of as many as possible, as long as possible. Um, and your players who were going to the NHL, so many of them were coming out of these little tiny clubs to start. So it wasn't just like, hey, if we put all our resources into these 10 clubs, that's how we're going to do it. No, like the best players are coming from very small places, right?
Like if you look at hockey in a global perspective, it's 1.7 million players in total, and 1.2 those million of those players are in Canada and in US, and we
Okay.
have 74,801 last year. So you were pretty spot on. So compared to US and Canada, we are a very small hockey country, so we can't afford to lose anyone.
Yeah.
First, we don't want to lose anyone because we want everyone to love the game. And also, we are contributing to a better society by having people in sports and hockey, public health, developing better citizens, giving people meaningful activities. So that's one part. But as you said, also, we see that a lot of the best players, both on the male and female side in Sweden, is coming from small clubs, from the small communities with a local rink. So we try as much as possible to promote local hockey, because then we keep the cost down. It's less traveling, so everyone can afford to play. And also, they can focus on practicing and playing games instead of traveling. So
Hmm.
imagine all the time some people are putting in traveling with traveling teams. Stay home, practice, play games locally. So I think that's something that we try to highlight. And one other thing that we do to support that, it's in most districts, there's only a few exceptions. We don't have tiers in our youth programs. If
Hmm.
you're U14, you play U14. It's not tier one, tier two, tier three.
Hmm.
It's only one tier. A few exceptions in the biggest cities, but that's more a practical standpoint than it is for development. So
Yeah.
we try to highlight it's important, and then somewhere along the journey as a hockey player, it's kind of course important to increase the competition. But if we keep people in the game, we aren't selecting early mature players, and we highlight local hockey because then they can practice, not travel.
Yeah, and your research on, just so people understand, if I talk about relative age, which is
Yeah.
where a kid's born compared to the calendar cutoff, versus developmental age, are they an early developer, average or size, or are they a late developer, someone who's growing late? You have some really interesting research on that I think maps with research done in other sports as well, is just the overrepresentation of early developers. So if you are making cuts very early, if you are tiering teams very young, you're really usually just tiering all the early developers or the older kids onto your tier one team, not necessarily the kids who might be the best long-term hockey players. So talk about that. I loved you had that great slide on just the percentage in, I think it was in national teams
Yeah.
by age of early and neutral developers versus late developers.
Yeah, so we have been tracking both relative age effect and biological maturation for a long time within our hockey high school programs. So a couple of years ago, we started to look at the data that we had. So we took 20 years of data from our hockey high school programs. It's 27 on the male side. So in this data set, we then had 4,700-ish players.
Mhm.
And then we back calculated their biological maturation and compared it to reference population in Sweden, and looked at if they were late into puberty, on time, or early.
Mhm.
And we mapped that in relation to each selection point within our system.
So
And what
like
we
under 12, under 14, under 16, this is your selection.
Yeah, but we only looked from 16 and onwards, because we
16
don't
onwards. Yeah.
typically don't select too
Yeah, yeah.
early. So we
Okay.
looked at first national team.
Oh, first national
So
team. Yeah.
yeah. So what we see then is in first national team, we are selecting more early mature on time or early, very few late. But as it goes under 18, under 20, and then we follow the players all the way to NHL. And what we can see in NHL, it's the reverse relationship that 40% of players from the same population were late mature, late into puberty.
Yeah.
So then we can figure out how many players did we deselect on the journey for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And we need to figure out, is there tools for us to not select player based on performance driven by physical abilities that are in puberty.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a eye opener for a lot of people, because normally you understand relative age effect if you're born late or early, but that effect normally shows pretty early, even from 8 years old in Sweden, but it kind of evens out sometimes when you're 12, 13, because you're then percentage you have lived kind of equally. The effect still is in the system, though, because we see that also in our data that more early born are selected for national teams, and the same scenario as with biological maturation. The Q4 players are playing NHL.
Mm-hmm.
But like just looking into biological maturation and puberty made a lot of people change their views on how we should select players in hockey.
Mm-hmm.
And we have also made a couple of changes within our programs to avoid this. We have collected data way back now in our regional camps. We have collected data back in district tournaments to see the distribution and help coaches and players understand that we shouldn't select only based on present performance, because it's driven by puberty.
Mm-hmm.
And if we also have this kind of knowledge, we can individualize training so they respond to training better if you're puberty or if you're not. We can avoid growth-related injuries, because we know in puberty you might have those injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And the coaches also get different perspective on the players. You know, well, those two players are at the moment pretty equal, but one is developing late into puberty. Let's keep this kid in the game longer. Let's not deselect the players. So we have tried a couple of things. We have done 2 papers now in what's called biobanding, where we are measuring the kids, for example, in 3 age categories in a club. And then instead of practicing or playing games in age categories, we are playing them in biological bands, so to speak. So it might be that the late developers in one age category is playing down, and the early mature is playing up, more based on their biological age. So they are presented with new challenges. So, for example, a person that are early developed and normally takes the puck and skate. Now, when they are meeting equals physically, they can't take the puck and skate. So they report for the first time that, well, I can't take the puck and skate. I need now to develop my technical and tactical skills. And also the other way around, the not so mature kids, if they are playing then or practicing with equals, they are reporting that, well, now I can be more of a leader. I can use my physical abilities more. So it looks like both groups are developing more. So we tried this together with USA Hockey in a project that were funded by IIHF. We have 2 papers out on biobanding. It looks really promising. And we also now are doing a so-called future team project with Finland, where we are selecting the under 16 national team, more on structural level then, not in clubs. And we are then measuring biological maturation in all the players. And we are selecting a shadow national team with only late mature players. And then we are playing national team games against Finland with players who otherwise would have been gone from the system. And this is normally done in soccer. And in Sweden, they've seen some great development from the future team pathway, with a lot of players from that pathway going then to under 21 national team and even senior national team that otherwise would have been gone also. So this is some of the things that we are doing to, on a structural level, helping late developers, and on a club level with biobanding.
Yeah, and I think there's 2 points I want to ask. The first is sort of a statement, which I think you talked about, which when that developmentally immature player went down and played with players who looked like him or her, coach perception changed as well.
Yes.
right? And how influential coach, we know from educational research how important teacher perception is on student performance, right?
Yeah.
Whether, oh, if I this kid is gifted, then I pay more attention. Well,
Yeah.
that has to change player performance when all of a sudden I see that player in a completely different light.
Yeah, and also we together with USA Hockey, we on several occasions also had coaches rank or scouts rank players, and we also had them blindly either rank in biobanded scenarios or in age categories, and it changes
Hmm.
because the perception of the coaches they change. They see other players as talented in this
Hmm.
kind of setting. And to your point, like if we are putting the labels on kids that they are talented based on present performance driven by physiology, they will get way more benefits, better coaching, more attention, harder to deselect. It's like the whole Matthew effect.
Yeah.
So if we then change the labels and give the opportunities equally, because there's nothing that indicates that genetically you have more potential if you're early mature.
Yeah.
It's equally distributed if you're on time, late or early.
Yeah.
So
As
now
long as
we
you
are
stay in the system, as long as you have
yes,
access to the coaching and the resources, right?
yeah,
But if you are selected out of the system, then yeah, you have no chance.
yeah. And I think like that's also the part we try to select as late as possible to be able to take or make a better decision. But at some point, you need to select because the resources aren't unlimited.
Right.
It's more a matter of when you select and how you select. How can we select as good as possible, and then distribute the resources to the players that have most potential? Because in the end of the day, at some point we need to do it
Yeah.
due to resources.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, that's just, not everyone gets to be prime minister. Like we select,
Nope.
right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, of
so,
course.
yeah. The other point of that I think we talked about at breakfast a little bit one morning is if these late developers are so overrepresented at the NHL level, or the national team level, um, there's something that they're getting out of being a late developer, right? Being a little smaller, not being able to solve everything physically, having to be more insightful, quicker thinking, technical, whatever. And then they develop the physical piece to go with that skill set that they developed. Are we in danger of losing those advantages if we always bioband them?
Yes, I think we are. Biobanding and other strategies to kind of avoid maturation effect or relative age effect should be used with caution. It should be a complement to ordinary age categories because, like, if you look at age categories, that's also a way of limiting the differences.
Yeah.
So I think like if we are changing too much, the problem will show up in a different area of the system.
Yeah.
And we had a discussion with Cote, and he was like, "Well, don't mess up the system because the problem will always show up in other place." And I
Yeah.
think like especially like the late mature players who have great game sense and skill and survives and still grow and then grow ahead of the players and get more motivated, getting better. There's something there that we don't want to take away, but
Right.
we still want to have the opportunities for more players not to be deselected for wrong reasons. So somewhere in the nuances there, I think we should be, and maybe use biobanding every 6th week or play a couple of games a month, but not as a replacer for age categories and for this. So and also I think the craft of being a coach, like the everyday job of a coach, to monitoring, to adjusting, to changing things in practice, in games, and being fluent is even more important if you try those things. So it probably will be more demands on the coach,
Yeah.
uh, but that's also what makes it fun.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But I just think it goes back to if I see a player in a different light and then
Yeah,
I go, okay, you know what? She or he is a really good player. this is a hard environment for them, but it doesn't mean they're not a good player. Let
Yep.
me make sure I keep coaching them. Even if I'm not thinking that consciously, subconsciously, I am if I've seen them in a whole different light. And we're very good at pushing the mature kid up. It's really the one who's behind,
Yeah.
giving them a games environment once in a while that lets us go, okay, you know what? They're going to be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times get the question, like for example, around changing the setting for challenging all the players. Should we skill-based group, or should we try to achieve this within the group, or should we play up, or should we play down? And what are the best players? We don't give them enough. And I have never been around a player that was the best player that quitted because they didn't get enough attention and chances.
Hmm.
But sometimes we're using the argument that we need to do more for the best players. I think it's in the other way around, that we should do more for the players that haven't developed that much in the beginning. And I think sometimes as coaches, we are overestimate how heterogeneous a group are.
Hmm.
So we are telling ourselves we need a skill-based group. And in the end of the day, that's a selection.
Hmm.
And for practical reasons, if you're two coaches, you're running late, it might be the easy thing to do. Have the better players in one end, the not so developed players in the other end, and then you're getting more attention to the better players.
Hmm.
In but you just wanted to achieve the optimal challenge point for you. So the kind of idea is good, but you're still labeling players and kind of
Hmm.
confirming your own choices.
Hmm.
If you're really good as coaches, we can handle this in the same group.
Hmm.
Like if you are having a drill and you have station-based practice and you have fast players, well, have the player that's fast start half a meter behind. If it's a skilled player, make them do an extra pass. If you as a coach are adult, put a stick there so they can decide left or right.
Hmm.
If you're there to manipulating the challenge all the time and set a threshold, like they should
Hmm.
succeed 4 out of 5, you can manipulate each drill
Hmm.
within the same practice, within the same group, instead of making those hard decisions with grouping. So I
Hmm.
think that's a really good coach can handle a lot of different players within the same group without having to do this. So
Yeah.
I think, like, I normally recommend try to solve this within your group before skill-based group. That
Hmm.
might be a practical solution, but not the best solution.
In this quest for the ideal world versus the real world, I think about, if I'm working with a bunch of players who might have a vast difference in ability, um, but have played a lot of hockey or played a lot of soccer, that might be easier to do than in the typical grassroots situation where this kid doesn't even want to be there and this kid's really there.
Yeah.
And that's where I've sort of in the real world is like, how far apart are this kid and this kid? And if they're pretty close, mix
Yeah.
it. If they're
Yeah.
so far apart that it's not fun for him and it's not fun for him, then maybe that's when we have to segregate it a little bit, not changing resources, not doing that, not all the time. But and that's I feel like sometimes in the real world is I lose them both if you know, and I can't catch this kid up in that environment because it's so far away right now.
Yeah, and I think you can somehow tie that to human motivation and the quality of motivation, like intrinsic motivation. Like if you feel competent, if that basic psychological need is fulfilled, you feel more motivated. So, for example, for the kid that's not that developed yet, it's not so fun to not never succeed. Then you
Right.
don't feel competent, and you might lose interest, and the other way around also. So I think there's a solid theoretical reasoning there behind why you should try to adapt, and also sometimes it might be the best way to, as you say, group them.
Hmm.
But we also need to acknowledge that there's so far nothing in sport that they have tried skill-based grouping in research because it's kind of hard to do, and it's also unethical.
Yeah.
It doesn't say that isn't effective because there's anecdotal evidence. So I think
Right.
there's something there, but we
Yeah.
haven't really researched it so far. So I think that's something we maybe should look in more to, even though it's kind of hard to research, to
Yeah.
design
Yeah.
the research.
Yeah. And again, I think this is the, if I'm coaching young footballers in Spain, every one of those kids is leaving practice and going to play pickup and getting lots of touches. If I'm coaching young footballers in Bend, Oregon, where I live, a lot of those kids are leaving practice and won't touch a ball till the next practice, and
Yeah,
maybe they're playing basketball or doing something else. And so they're not developing it the same as those couple kids who are touching a ball every time. And
yeah,
so you get that. And again, this is just the challenge. And I think also, who often coaches these kids is our least experienced coaches.
yeah.
And it's sometimes the hardest environment to coach in.
Yeah, I think that's a paradox also, like with coaching. And like in Sweden, it's all volunteer. It's mostly parents that coach sport. And I think that's something we should uh, share as and highlight, because it keeps the cost down and makes sport accessible. So a lot of kids can be part of sports. If we would have pro coaches paid,
Hmm.
we would increase the barriers for kids to be in sport.
Right.
The downside, though, is sometimes we don't have coaches that can handle all the kids and the different need of the kid or the different challenge point of the kid.
Yeah.
But I still think the benefits are better when we keep the cost down and keep everyone in the
Agree.
sport than having like the whole debate on commercialized youth sports or professionalized youth sports. I
Yeah.
have no problem in youth sports being better, coaching being better. I
Yeah.
have problems when it's commercialized, when the cost goes up so kids can't be part of sports. That's my
Yeah.
problem. I think that's more important to keep the cost down
Yeah.
and sometimes to have the most skilled coach.
Yeah, I agree. I think you said that really, really well. It's somewhere on this spectrum between ability to include and the quality of programming, and you got to find it's not either or. If you go this way, you lose some here. If you go all here,
Yeah.
you lose kids here. And all right, the I think final little piece here, just and that's a great segue into it. We have a mutual colleague and friend, Amanda Visick,
Yes.
and her work on fun and what she calls, the fun maps and the things that drive engagement and motivation and stuff. And you were telling me how you guys kind of, I've cited her work and Project Play Does and everything of, well, what is fun for kids? And so you did some work with her where you sort of repeated some of her studies in Sweden hockey. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we had Amanda over for 6 months for a sabbatical. So she worked with us first of like translating and doing cognitive interviews. So just see that all of the determinants made sense in the Swedish context. So we kind of changed a couple of determinants and also added a couple. So we now have 83 in Sweden instead of 81
Hmm.
determinants, but the categories are the same.
Hmm.
So we have collected data in uh, three different occasions. First, we collected hockey, basketball in Sweden. Then we collected hockey in Sweden again last year, and we also collected soccer in Sweden. So in total, it's probably around 2,000 kids. And
Hmm.
in her first studies, it's around 140,
Yeah, it was
41.
much bigger. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a much larger data set. And we have now two papers under review, one on soccer in Sweden and one on hockey in Sweden, where Amanda helped us also. And what we can see is it's the same factors.
Hmm.
It's tiny, tiny differences culture-wise, where people in Scandinavia and Sweden tend to like the relatedness a bit more,
Hmm.
but the top ranked factors are the same.
Hmm.
It doesn't differ between young kids, old kids, boys, girls, big programs, small programs. In our paper, we are looking also in hockey in these differences, and there's a few with statistical significance, but
Hmm.
on the big picture, it's the same. And I think this is really important with the fun maps, because people tend to think that fun is where you laugh and goof around.
Right.
But fun is actually for kids, regardless if you are 7 or 20 years old, where you try hard, you
Yeah.
set goals and you strive for the goals, when you compete,
Hmm.
when you have positive social interactions with your teammates, when you have positive coaching, a coach that allows mistakes.
Hmm.
So I think the things that keeps the kids in the game, the things that are fun for them, is the same factors that also develop them and makes the best players. There's no difference there. Like, for example, doing your best, trying hard, that also makes you develop. And I think this research has highlighted this misconception and made it very accessible. And also, when we see the factors among the 18 highest ranked factors, like 5 or 6 of those relates to the coach. So it's
Hmm.
actually something that we can control as coaches and promote.
Hmm.
And those are pretty tied to self-determination theory, autonomy, competence, relatedness, and also relates to transformation coaching.
Hmm.
So I think it's something that we can control as coaches to make the experience better. And we will also now start to do a paper on this with Swedish NHL players to
Hmm.
see the factors that kids up to 20 report is the same factors for adult players on the highest level.
Hmm.
And let's see how that plays out.
Yeah, that's
This
going to
season.
be really fascinating because when I cite this research, and just for people listening again, she had these 81 determinants, you had 83, and then they put them in buckets, and the top three buckets were this trying hard, so
Yep.
like a competitive environment,
Yep.
a positive coaching, and positive team dynamics. And so I
Yes.
would say all three of those are directly impacted by the coach, right?
Yes.
You own that whole environment. You run the right practices, make it challenging. It's obviously positive coaching and treating people with respect is all you. And then team dynamics is not something you ignore. It's something you need to be intentional about.
Yeah.
And so the number one question I always get is, oh, but aren't these just recreational players? Like, what do you mean they don't care about winning or anything like that? But your study, and I know even her original one spanned different levels of players too. These aren't just, the kid who
No.
shows up to play hockey one day a week. These are serious players, right?
Yeah, we tried also to have like the smallest club to the biggest clubs and to the top clubs like both SHL and SDHL, like the top leagues, youth programs. So we have included both, and we can't see any differences there. And it's the same in soccer in Sweden. They don't either see difference between recreational, if you we don't use those terms, but
Yeah.
for the big and the smaller club. So I think that's a really important piece there. And also what you need to acknowledge and put out there is, out of the 81 or 83, winning is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. I think it was
And that,
48 on her US study.
yeah. But on the other hand, winning is the only outcome there also. So, but what you also need to say that all of the determinants make sports fun.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of prioritize.
Right.
So winning is important, but there's things that's way more important than winning. For example, try hard, do your best, achieve your goals.
Yeah.
That's more important, and that might lead to winning.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's only an outcome. So I think that's also good. And in Sweden, we usually say that, well, the Americans and the Canadians, they are competing so hard, they really want to win regardless of prize. But one funny thing is that winning is higher ranked in Sweden than it is in the US in the original papers.
That's
So
interesting.
they kind of changed for us there.
Well, I can't wait to see when it's done with the pros. And the last time I talked to Amanda a couple years ago, she was looking for grants in order to expand this across sports and socioeconomic and right, how can we take this and look at different levels? But I think looking at the highest level of players and saying, well, what drove engagement for you is critical. And there'll always be people who push back on it and be like, well, that's not my kid, right?
Yeah.
My kid only cares about winning, right? And it's like, we'll see.
Yeah, I think like Amanda's done also now in individual sports, both in tennis and in swimming, and it's the same factors there. And I think also the probably the most interesting paper is the paper where she compared the coaches and parents' beliefs towards the kids.
Mm,
And you can see like that what parents thinks is most important isn't.
yeah.
So there's different when you ask the kid compared to what the adults are thinking is most important to make hockey fun or sports.
Yeah. So much to cover, John. So little time. Is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't, or any final point you want to, final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
No, I guess there's always interesting things to talk about, but I think we cover a lot here. And also, just to point out to all parents and coaches out there, the development of human beings and athletes takes time. So don't rush it. Let kids be kids. It's their journey. It's not yours. Just be there to support them and do what's best for their well-being. And if they are part of the game, they have a chance to be good at the game, but it's their journey. So don't rush development. It takes time.
Mm. John, I love it. How can people get in touch with you if they want to connect, see some of the research you've done, or just touch base with one of the people that I respect most in the sport development and the coach development world?
I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, and also my email address is on the Swedish Ice Hockey Association's webpage. So feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to interact or set up a call or share papers.
Brilliant. Awesome. Well, John, truly, truly appreciate you being on. This was a great conversation. The hour flew by, and best of luck with your future projects. And I certainly hope and look forward to the day with a couple more hikes and 3 hour breakfasts and dinners with you again, because that was definitely one of the best things I've ever done. So thanks for being on the Way of Champions, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Wow, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you to John Lind. What a great conversation. Great breadth of knowledge that he has, and I think we covered so many important topics. If we start there from the end, just the repeating of the fun determinants and the fun map study with Amanda Visick and across multiple sports and a much larger population of athletes and different levels. And the answers are so similar. I thought that was such an interesting thing, right? So the more evidence that comes out, a competitive environment, positive coaching, positive team dynamics, these are the things that drive joy. These are the things that drive engagement and motivation. Love the work on relative age and developmental age, and just this whole thing that, right? The best way is as many as possible, as long as possible, in the best environment possible. That's coaching. That's what we have to do. And in a country like Sweden, with a much smaller population, they can't afford to lose anyone. So they develop everybody for as long as possible instead of just throwing 100 eggs against the wall and hoping one doesn't break. So I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I hope you'll connect with John if you have further follow up. I truly appreciate it. Now, before I go, just a reminder, registration for our 2026 Way of Champions retreat is open. Spots are filling up really fast. So if you are interested in that, just go to changingthegameproject.com. You'll see Way of Champions with WOC certification in the main menu. Check it out. Get signed up quick. It's a 4-day, 3-night retreat combined with 6 months of pre-work and 5 months of follow-up work. So it's an entire year program that's going to take your coaching to a whole new level. Small group, small cohort that becomes your greatest teammates and supporters on the journey. So whether you want to take this information, be certified and go teach it, just bring it back to your school, just bring it back to your team or your club or your community, whatever you want to do. There's never been a program like this. Our first cohort are still 10 messages a day in a WhatsApp group. That's how connected they all still are. So if you're interested, just check that out and sign up quick because those spots are going to be gone very, very, very soon. Okay. Thanks to Sprocket Sports. Thanks to our Patreon podcast champions. And thank you to all of you for listening, for sharing, for leaving us reviews, for ordering our books. Your influence is never neutral. So go out there, change the world, make a difference this week, just like John Lind's making a difference in Sweden. See you again next week, everyone.